All right, the latest in Utah's housing market. Eviction protections are now lifted for renters, and this morning we continue our summer interview series on the Utah Housing Crunch. Interviews with the experts live every Monday through the rest of the summer. Today we're talking the dire renting situation here in Utah. At the beginning of the pandemic, lawmakers created an eviction moratorium, so a stall on most evictions because of this dangerous virus. But Saturday, July 31st, that stall was lifted, and now people who can't work because of the pandemic are at risk of losing their homes. The moratorium credited for keeping more than 2 million people in stable housing during this pandemic. So this morning we're talking with two important Utah agencies at the front lines of this fight to keep people housed in their homes. Deneen Adams, Executive Director of Open Doors. You guys provide housing and help in Davis County. And then Arohan with People's Legal Aid, providing legal help again for evictions during this kind of crazy time. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. It's lovely to be here.
Deneen, can I start with you? Up in Davis County, can you kind of quantify the issue for me? I understand you guys are literally putting people in hotels.
Yes, we are. We actually, in Davis County, we are kind of unique in our situation. We don't have a shelter up there, so when we have people that are facing evictions, we actually have to put them in hotel motels until we either get them to Ogden, in Lantern House, or in Salt Lake City. So when somebody's evicted in Davis County, it's tough.
Right.
It's very tough.
Very few options available.
Exactly.
How are you anticipating seeing the dynamic change even more now that this moratorium is lifted?
We've definitely seen an uptick. So we've seen an uptick in people being evicted for non-payment of rent, which should not be happening right now. There's a lot of relief out there. There's a lot of services to help people pay their rent if they've been impacted by COVID. So we've seen an uptick. A lot of it, too, is just landlords taking advantage of people that are in dire situations. It's very sad.
And I think you're maybe quantifying a problem even behind the moratorium being lifted, is that even when it was in place, maybe landlords weren't following that. Aro, can I turn to you on that one? Is that something you guys are seeing at People's Legal Aid?
Yes, absolutely. Something that renters should know in Utah is that Utah is probably the most landlord-friendly state in the country. The CDC moratorium is specifically geared only towards non-payment of rent issues, and while those are the majority of cases filed in Utah for evictions, that doesn't encompass all of it. Lease terminations, lease violations for nuisance, etc., those are very common as well. And especially in Salt Lake City, where there are more sophisticated landlords, or they're just represented by attorneys, they kind of know how to get around that. So in Salt Lake, we're not seeing a spike, but because we've had for the past year had landlords more savvy to how to navigate around that.
Got it. Interesting. So when you're approached by someone needing help for this crisis, this situation, can we begin with kind of the basics? On your website, I found it really interesting. It's important to know the basics of what an eviction looks like and what a landlord needs to do in order to start that eviction process. Would you go through that, Aro?
Yeah. So an eviction process begins with an eviction notice. There are many different kinds of eviction notices. I mentioned a few, but again, some are non-payment of rent, lease termination, and for lease terminations, very quickly, they don't need a reason to do it. They just need to properly serve you that form.
Interesting.
And it's very strict in the law in how it's complied. However, once the landlord complies, there's not really a defense to if you don't comply within that period of time. So for failure to pay or vacate, it's 3 days. A termination notice.
That's fast.
Yeah, it's very fast. Utah has a very quick turnaround rate for evictions.
And given just our complete lack of inventory right now, someone might not have the time to find something that's appropriate or that they can afford.
And that's the reason why we're putting them in hotels. We just had a woman who had a 3-day pay or vacate. We went, we paid the landlord, they still evicted her, and now it's so hard to place her back in an apartment because she has an eviction on her background. So, and especially with there being such a lack of affordable housing, it's very tough after they've been evicted for our agency to place them.
Very quickly before we have to go, unfortunately, I'm sure we could talk about this the rest of the hour, but for someone watching this morning who is maybe nearing a housing crisis, where should they go for help?
If they need help in assistance, financial assistance, they can come to opendoorsutah.org, or they can go to the state portal, which is rentrelief.utah.org.
Perfect.
And the number one thing is to act quickly. If you're behind on your rent, get in touch with us so we can definitely help you.
Got it. Perfect. Aro, any other resources?
If people receive an eviction notice, I know Utah Legal Services and my organization, People's Legal Aid, offer free consultations. If we can't outright represent your case, you can at least get good advice on how to proceed legally, what your rights are. So I highly recommend reaching out as soon as you can. There's a real mental health component in these things, and people feel frozen. Just call somebody and get the ball rolling, because ignoring it is not going to make it better.
There is help available, and right now, because of the pandemic, there are funds available if you can reach out and ask for those. Aro and Deneen, thank you so much for being here this morning. I so appreciate it. We'll have all of these links and resources on our website, abc4.com. Stick around though. Coming up later this hour, more on the Utah housing crunch. We'll be speaking live with a realtor about the brutal housing buying market.